form to place their right hand over their heart. After this, State Command Chaplain Bazar will then give the invocation.
Guard, attention, Harry, colors. Forward, march. March time. March. Guard. Roll. Center. Ready. Present. March.
Close the colors. Chaplain Bazar.
Please join me freely in prayer or personal thought, if you so choose. Our eternal guardian and ever-loving protector, we have come together to rededicate this school of learning by honoring the true, courageous, and heroic action of one of your faithful servants, Chaplain First Lieutenant Jon DeValles of the famous 26th Yankee Division, in celebration of the division's 100th anniversary. Since 1920, this new Bedford Elementary School has borne his sacred name as a symbol of honor and pride. Chaplain DeValles risked his own life on the World War I battlefield so that others may live and return home to their loved ones. His actions 100 years ago exemplify the very best of our National Guard, our citizen soldiers, the Chaplain Corps. Chaplain DeValles lived the call, forever true to his faith of pro Deo et Patria, for God and country. May this school forever proudly shine for all to see as it bears its proud rededicated name, the Jon B. DeValles Elementary School. Today we remember your servant, Father DeValles, who cared for his troops, and ask that you instill within us the spirit and inspiration to give our very best to our nation, our Commonwealth, through gain knowledge in life and peace. Holy One, may future generations of chaplains, service members, and great citizens, young and old, work together in peace and harmony as one American people. May our Commonwealth of Massachusetts, along with all citizens of our great nation, be forever blessed with your divine light, hope, spirit, and strength. Amen. You may be seated.
Well, good morning, boys and girls. Boys and girls of all ages, but especially the elementary school students of the DeValles School. I will focus my remarks in your direction because we're really here about you today. I wanted to begin my remarks by thanking a number of folks and welcoming certain other ones. I first of all wanted to welcome the State Adjutant General, Major General Keith, for being here today. I don't know if it's been explained to you guys, but the Adjutant General is the commander of the State National Guard, the Army and the Air Side together, and we have a terrific leader in our Adjutant General, Major General Keith. So I just really want to thank you, sir, for your support of this effort. I want to thank all who've attended, the descendants of Father DeValles, for sure, who have, I'm sure, plenty of stories to share with you, including one who used to teach right here at the school. I want to thank the superintendent and Principal Tonks for making this day possible as well, and I want to thank those who are representing the Yankee Division Veterans Association for keeping the flame. I also want to thank in particular my friend Major Tom Clark for making this thing happen. Tom Clark used to be on the school committee here in New Bedford. He's an Iraq War veteran, and he's a New Bedford guy. And this was his idea, and I really want to thank him personally. I would ask you to join me in a round of applause for so I think I'm not going to. There's a speaking program, and I wanted just to offer up a few words that I hope will spark some contemplation on the part of the students here. So, to get a sense of what Father DeValles did, you have to sort of take yourself back in time, of course, 100 years ago. So 100 years ago, just a little over 100 years ago, the United States declared war on Germany. This was after a long time really trying to stay out of things in Europe. It was a war among countries that were ruled by kings, and that wasn't our thing in America. Of course, you're learning about that in school. But the war really pushed us to the point where we had no choice. American vessels were being sunk by submarines. There was a policy called unrestricted submarine warfare, which the Germans reinitiated in 1917, and lots of American civilians were losing their lives out on the high seas. It got really, really bad. And so the point came where President Wilson said, enough's enough, we've got to step in. And so that's what happened in 1917. And so what happened? So it happened everywhere across America, where people just had to step up and do something on behalf of their country. And there was little hesitation, whether you were on a farm somewhere in the Midwest or out in the desert in Arizona, or if you lived in the bayous of Louisiana, or if you lived in New Bedford, you knew you had to step up for America. And you can picture what New Bedford was like back then, because as it turns out, our neighborhood here, this part of the South End, as well as many other parts of the city, didn't look all that different, right? So if you look around, this school was here. It was called the Catherine Street School. The park, Ashley Park, was there. Mount Carmel Church was there. There used to be the Goodyear factory over there. There were more mills, and this was a city that was really growing. It was bigger in terms of population than it is now. It was more dense. People, just about everybody walked to work in a mill, and just about everyone, this is sort of a key point, virtually everybody, the vast majority of people who lived in New Bedford had families, came from families that had just immigrated. And had a lot of them, most of them had just immigrated from where the war was taking place. So think about that. And some of them were, had to go fight against countries that their family had come from, or families that had some connection to those countries. In my own family's case, and I'll just use this as an example, so just indulge me for a second. My grandmother grew up in a house where the Elm Street Garage downtown is now located, and had a big family. Her parents came over from Bavaria, which is part of Germany, and she had 5 older brothers that went over to the war. Now think about that. This is not atypical. He had 5 brothers who went over to fight against the country that their parents had just come from, and whose language they spoke at the dinner table, right? So this was a deeply patriotic city. That is a story that countless families in our city can tell, and it's also really highlights what Father DeValles was part of. Father DeValles was an immigrant to this country as well. and he stepped up at a time, knowing that as a priest, as a man of a cloth, as they say, that he wasn't going to engage in combat. It would be against his calling as a priest. But there were ways that he could contribute, and ways that really required him to show extraordinary courage. And so when we talk about what he did, I mean, picture what it was like when America got fully involved in the war in 1918. So 99 years ago, there were kids not too much older than what you are now, all heading over there, and it was their job to fight the enemy on the other side of an area that was swept with machine gun fire and hit with artillery. It was very, very dangerous. They looked out across no man's land, and not only was it dangerous, but they could see where bodies laid that had been shot down or blown up one way or the other, not just a couple of months earlier, but 2 years before and so forth. And it was such an awful place that people couldn't go out, soldiers couldn't go out and bring those bodies back. That's the kind of environment that Father DeValles did his work in, to go out as chaplains have historically done, gone out and comforted people, comforted soldiers, even sometimes soldiers on the other side, under the most difficult of circumstances. It required of him extreme courage, and he paid a very dear physical price for doing that. He was wounded, as they tell us, by a German gas attack that left him debilitated and ultimately led to a death at a very young age. This is what he did for our country, and so it was appropriate then, 100 years ago, for the city, almost 100 years ago, for our city to name this school in his honor. We don't name schools, we haven't before, and we won't in the future name schools after just anybody. We name schools, we honor people who are worthy of our emulation. In other words, we name schools after people we think are heroic, because everybody needs a hero. Everybody needs somebody to look up to. Everybody needs somebody to emulate, because we all want to be better people. We have to, all of you, I know, understand that we need, all of us need to find ways to make ourselves better people, kinder people, more courageous, more virtuous people as we go on. And as much as you're learning in school about math and science and social studies, is another big part of your experience in school that is so important. That's the kind of people you're developing into. And so what all these folks up here have done today is really to show you this really great example. It's cool to watch a Black Hawk land and take off, and we hope you have some fun and learn something from that. But the bigger point here, boys and girls, is the lesson that the person who your school is named after has taught us, which is care for country, to care for your fellow man, to extend yourself a little bit more in the cause of worthy purposes. That's what it's really about. So if there's anything for you to take away today, boys and girls, it's that. I'm so glad we had a nice day today, that you could come out here and experience a very, very rich ceremony like this, and to see some people here really exemplify the things that Father DeValles believed in. Thank you very much for listening, boys and girls. You've been great.
The Massachusetts National Guard, Major General Gary W. Keith.
Morning, boys and girls. Come on, I know you can be louder than that. Good morning, boys and girls. Good morning! I'm going to say a few words, and then as the mayor said, we've got some other neat stuff for you guys to take a look at. But as the mayor also mentioned, we're here to talk about a hero, a real hero. So good morning. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Superintendent Durkin, Principal Lungs, Father Alabera, Brigadier General Lapalita, Brigadier General Contrachuk, Chaplain Colonel Larry Baser, always a pleasure, Colonel Overton, Mr. Larry Finnerty, Counselor Naomi Connery, especially all you students here at the DeValles School. Welcome and thank you for inviting me, and not just let me talk to you today, but get me out of my office, so I appreciate that. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge and welcome some very, very special guests here today. They're all relatives, as was mentioned, of Father Jon B. DeValles. Mrs. Estelle Pyrus, whose father was Father DeValles' cousin. Her husband, William. Her sister, Eileen Fernandez. And her daughter, Darlene Azadina. Thank you all for being here today as we honor your late cousin. I also want to acknowledge one of our own, and he is your vice principal. You guys know him as Mr. Silva. I know him as Sergeant Silva. So when he's not, where did he disappear to? There he comes. So when he's not walking around with that shoved tie, he is wearing a uniform like this, and he works for what's called an intelligence wing. And this is an intelligence wing. 24 hours a day, they are looking through satellites and looking at bad guys around the world. So when you see him, he is known as, to me, he is Technical Sergeant Silva, and he is a great American and a great airman. So, it's always a pleasure to meet him. So as the mayor said, the 26th Yankee Division, that was a large Army organization that came from New England, mostly out of Massachusetts, but covered all New England. 100 years ago, as the mayor said, World War I, which was called the Great War. And the Great War, what everyone thought at the time would be the war to end all wars, so there'd be no future wars. But that didn't happen. So part of the 26th Yankee Division, they had many heroes, but no one was more loved, respected, and thought of than Father Baptist DeValles, who grew up, as the mayor mentioned, right here in the city of New Bedford. He served the good people of New Bedford as a loving priest. And in the military, we have a code. It's summed up with the saying, "We leave no man behind." It stands for the principles that we all stand together and fight together. We face the challenges as one team, one unit, and no matter what happens, who falls, who's wounded, we all come home together. And Father DeValles lived to that code. World War I, as was mentioned, was a terrible, terrible war. It went on for a long time, but as the mayor mentioned, the battlefield was just nothing but death and destruction. So much so that the soldiers lived underground. They lived in trenches, dirt trails dug underground. They lived in caves. Terrible weapons came out in World War I. Father DeValles suffered from gas attack. So you guys, when you do gym class and you're running, you're playing sports, football, any football players out there? You know what it's like when you run with your pads on a hot, humid day and you can't breathe? People that suffer from gas attacks during this war, they had that 100 times worse. Just walking, they could not breathe. The United States soldiers who had to endure these hardships were brave. However, they all recognized that Father DeValles was one of the bravest among them. His door was always open to his soldiers. When he received supplies from home, from his family, from his congregation, it usually was clothing, books, I'm sure a lot of good baked stuff. Let's be honest, I'm sure there's plenty of Portuguese bakeries around that sent him plenty of good stuff. Whenever he received it, he always gave it to his men first. Even when he wasn't in his room, when he was out on the battlefield administering the faith, his door was always wide open, and his soldiers were always allowed to come in and just take whatever they wanted to eat. When he asked about why he allowed that, he goes, "I didn't mind at all. There's always going to be more coming." During the 4 days, what became known as the Battle of Apamon, Father DeValles stayed right in the midst of the fight. He helped carry wounded and worked until his wrist and hands gave out from carrying stretchers. So he worked non-stop, taking wounded and dying men off the battlefield, carrying them in stretchers, to the point where his hands were knurled like this and didn't work anymore. That didn't stop him. Once his hands and wrists gave out, he adopted a soldier's trick. He took telephone wire and wrapped them around the stretchers, and then wrapped them around loops and had them on his wrist. He still continued to carry them while his hands were bleeding and the skin was peeling away from his hands. He searched in the wake of fighting multiple waves for those who had been dropped or wounded, and comforted the last moments of those that would die of their wounds on the battlefield. So after he got everyone back that he could, he went back out to administer last rites and last prayers for those men that weren't going to survive. Major General Clarence Edwards, commander of the 26th Infantry Division, said this about Father DeValles. He lived on the front lines, in the trenches with the fighting men. He even did this when it was not in his own unit. He was a friend to all soldiers. I found him there myself as I toured the front lines. I found Father DeValles, even though the 104th Infantry, his unit, was in the rear. He would sneak back to the front lines, back into battle. I thought he was wearing himself out, and I ordered him to rest. However, he continued to care for the soldiers who were facing the most danger. So even after a 2-star general tells the father, a lieutenant, hey, you're done, you need to knock it off, he still went back out there, taking care of the wounded and the dying. He represented the spirit of the Yankee Division. I'm honored to represent the men and women of the Massachusetts National Guard here today, as we honor a great man, a great priest, a great American, and a great and true hero. You have a great school here, and a great neighborhood, and a great city. I ask all of you, as students, here today to remember the man for which this school is named, to remember his deeds, but also to live up to the example that he has set for all of us to follow. As was mentioned, we all need heroes. And you're going to be faced with decisions in life. You're going to have stuff that's going to trap you and hurt you. And if you make that wrong decision, always ask yourself, wherever your hero is, what would your hero do? If you're not sure who your hero is, learn more about Father DeValles. I recently learned that the Massachusetts National Guard Museum had a piece of history related to Father DeValles. It's a bronze tablet that has been created in his likeness. And the tablet was commissioned, which means it was paid for and built by the soldiers who befriended Father DeValles during the most challenging times of their lives while they were fighting the enemy in battle. These soldiers did not want his example of courage to be forgotten. They could have memorialized hundreds of other men, but they chose Father Jon B. DeValles. They honored the man who was there for them when they needed help the most. They honored the man for whom this great school is named. I wanted this great piece of art and history to be placed where it could have the greatest impact and inspire the most people, where it would be honored and cared for. And there was no other place when we talked about it, the Jon B. DeValles School. I can think of no better place than the Jon B. DeValles Elementary School here in the city of New Bedford, a city that for hundreds of years has provided fighting men and women for our nation's wars, specifically in the Yankee Division. In the Yankee Division, an unbelievable amount of soldiers came from New Bedford and the Fall River area. If Father DeValles was here today, he would still recognize this place, this town, this area, this street, as the mayor mentioned. He walked the streets of the city and this very neighborhood. He must have walked past this very school, as it was built in 1911 and named for him in 1920. I know he would be very proud that this school bears his name, and he would be proud of each and every student who attends this great school. And he would be proud of the young men and women and great Americans you are now and you will become as you become adults. Again, thank you for welcoming me here today. May God bless all the parents, teachers, especially your teachers, and students, each of you, of the Jon B. DeValles School. Remember, do the right thing. There's a lot out there that's going to trip you up and tempt you to make the wrong choice. Don't do it. Ask yourself what your hero would do. May God bless the great city of New Bedford. May God bless the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And now and forever, may God bless our great United States of America. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to ask Mayor Mitchell, General Pete, Councilor Naomi Carney, and Mr. Finity to come forward. And Mr. Silva, we get the 3 students that are going to help us with this unveiling. All right, come on forward. Come on forward, kids. Don't be shy. Angeli, Olivia, Ronnie. Come on front. Join the mayor, Ronnie. Join the general ladies. Come on forward. At this time, Mayor Mitchell and General Keefe are going to unveil the bust of Chaplain DeValles as a gift from the Mass National Guard to the city of New Bedford.
I'm going to do a countdown from 3, all right? 3,
2,